Extender Configurator for Sage 300 allows you to configure logging, alerts and notifications, workflow and track approvals, create Orchid notes, and trigger integration using custom code. This quick start video is going to concentrate on workflow and tracking approvals. In this first example, we're going to use Extender Workflow to notify a manager that a large order has been created. And rather than just receiving an email, the manager will need to use the workflow console and mark the notification or the workflow instance as read. So we're going to import a workflow template and an email template to use with this workflow template. We're also going to configure the managers as workflow users on the license screen, and then we're going to demonstrate entering the order as Susan, and then as Steve, we're going to go ahead, access the console, and acknowledge the notification. In our workflow company, I had previously activated Extender, and in the options on the email tab, had configured email, so Extender can send emails to notify people of workflow instances being created. And previously, I had imported some message templates, and the one we're going to use with this workflow notification workflow template is this one here. So when a order has been created and the dollar value is greater than our minimum of 5,000, it's going to send this email and then wait for the workflow instance to be approved. Our next step is to import the workflow template. And this template can be downloaded from our website, orchid.systems. And here's the workflow template. When the order is first created, it sets the description, sets the value to the order total, evaluates if the amount is greater than $5,000. If it is, it's going to do step 40, which is send the email with the order notification. Go to step 50, assign the user to admin, set the status as notified, and if the amount is not greater than 5,000, it's going to go to step 70, set the status no email needed, and complete. And once it's changed the status to notified, it's going to step 90, which is to go to our wait step. And in our wait step, we're waiting for the person to click the button saying mark as read, and the mark as read completes the workflow status and sets the status to read. So we're going to change this workflow template to assign the admin user to Steve and change the email notification to go to Steve. And now we need to attach our workflow template to the OE order view. So searching on the OE orders, the OE order header view is OE 0520. And on the workflow tab, we're going to attach the workflow template to the insert. So when the order is first created, and the workflow we're going to run is our notification mark if read, and the entry step we're going to do is start. So when an order is inserted, it's going to start off the order notification mark of read, and the step it's going to do is start. And then in our license screen, we're going to go and make Steve a workflow user so he can access the console. So in your license screens, depending on the license that you've purchased, you are able to make users workflow users, in my case up to 10. And if you're using Workflow Anywhere, you need to say which users are Workflow Anywhere users too. So in making Steve a workflow user, Steve will now be able to access the workflow console and mark any notifications as read. So logging in as Susan, we're going to create 2 orders. One for customer 1200, where the order is going to be larger than our limit of 5,000. And a second one for custom comfort, which will be less than 5,000. Logging in as Steve, when he accesses the workflow console, and he's able to do this because we made him a workflow user, he sees this order number 72 waiting for him to mark as read, and his next action is mark on read. And Steve would have also received an email to this effect too. So from the console, Steve can mark as read, which completes the workflow instance. And any other user who has access can go to the workflow summary. We can see if we've created a few orders. But the last two, 72 and 73, are the ones we've been looking at. So order 72. Order 72 has a status of mark as read, and if we look at the detail, we see it was created by Susan, and then it was in the wait state, and Steve clicked mark as read. Whereas the small order, order 73, the status was no email, and it was closed immediately. We have just seen how to access the workflow instances using the workflow console, but you are also able to access the workflow instances using icons on the Sage 300 screens. And we use Information Manager to configure the icons on the required Sage 300 screens. So in this next example, we're going to activate Information Manager, and we're going to configure an icon onto the OE order screen so that we can see which workflow instances are in progress and even progress a workflow instance from the OE order entry screen, just as we could with the workflow console. And we're also going to have a look at the logging icon and configure that around the AR customer screen. After downloading and installing Information Manager, you need to activate Information Manager in those companies where you need access to the workflow icons. And the workflow icons are configured on the Notes, DML and Extender Tray tab in IM Options. And clicking on the Details tab, as it's easier to work seeing all the fields that are relevant to your configuration row. The first type of configuration we're going to do is to extend a workflow. And we need to know the roto ID or the screen ID that we want to attach this workflow icon to. And in our case, it's order entry. So looking at the OE order transactions, looking at the properties, we see the roto ID is OE1100. And the field label that the workflow instance is associated with is the order number, order NO full stop. So we want to associate this configuration row with the OE1100 screen and with the field label order no full stop. And the workflow that it's associated with is the order notif mark red. And those users where the tray icon is automatically started and who are set up in Extender as a workflow user will see those icons. So I'm just going to set Susan up as a workflow user as well, so she'll be able to see the icons on the OE order entry screen as well as Steve. Now logged in as Susan, when she opens up the order entry screen, and for order 73 we see this new icon, the workflow icon. It's a grey arrow showing us there has been a workflow instance. It's not active anymore on this particular order. And when we select it, we go into the workflow history for this order, and we see that in the detail, Susan created this particular record. The workflow instance started when Sue created the order, and because it was less than 5,000, straight away the status was set to no email and it was closed. Whereas if we look at order 72 and drill into that history, you'll see it was started by Susan and it was set into the wait state because the order value was greater than 5,000, and then Steve marked it as red, and that's what completed the workflow and set the status to red. If Sue creates a new order, which is greater than $5,000, when that order is inserted, the workflow instance is started, Steve has sent an email, and we can see the arrow is now green, which shows us that there's a workflow in progress for this order, and the next step is mark as red. It's not for Sue to mark as red, but she can still see what status it's in. And logged in as Steve, if he goes to that same order, the icon is now a person because this particular workflow instance is waiting for him to progress, and he could progress from here, or he could progress from the workflow console as we did previously. So Steve could progress from there, which completes the workflow instance. And to configure the Extender log icon as an alternative to typing backtick tab to see the log changes on the customer screen, we note the field label is customer number for customers, and the roto ID is AR1300. Back in our IM options on the Notes.dml Extender Tray tab, we're going to configure a new row. So we're going to configure the Extender log for AR1300, customer number field, and logging in as Sue or Steve. On the AR customer screen, we see the log icon, and when we click it, we see the same log of who changed the customer credit limit from what to what. In this example, we're going to control the posting of bank entries. We're going to attach a workflow template to the insert of a bank entry, and we're going to enable drill down from the workflow console back to the bank entry to have a closer look at the bank entry details. We will use a workflow icon on the bank entry screen to show that there's an active workflow instance in progress. And we'll use Sage Security and user profiles to control where the posting takes place for the bank entries. Approving on the workflow console will be what posts the bank entry. The configuration required for posting the bank entries, firstly we'll start off with the workflow template. I have downloaded the Post Bank Entries workflow template from the website and imported it. And we can see that the first step of the Post Bank Entries sets the description of the bank entry, sets the drill down from the workflow console back to the bank entry, and then checks if does a workflow already exist for this bank entry. If it does, then it's going to straight away set the description workflow already is active and auto close and complete this workflow instance. But if it's a new workflow instance, so when they first insert the record, it's going to assign the user to Steve, set the status for waiting to post, and then go to step wait. And the wait step has two progress to actions, approve or reject. If they approve, it's going to set the status to approved, post the bank entry, set the status to posted, and then set a few of the description fields and complete. If they reject, it's going to set the status to rejected and complete, so the bank entry will not be posted. And we have a step to handle any errors. The workflow template is then attached to the bank entries header. So on the workflow tab, it's been attached to the upsert, so when the record is inserted or updated, so that if it's rejected and then they go and do a change and then resave the bank entry, then the workflow instance will be started again. So whenever the record is inserted or updated, it's going to run the post bank entries workflow template and start on the check step. And in order to get the icons on the bank entry screen in Information Manager options, on the Notes DML Extender Tray tab, we've configured the bank entry screen. So the roto ID of the bank entry, the field label that's going to trigger the workflow, and which workflow to display. And the final part of this configuration is to do with the users. So in Admin Services, we have two security groups for bank services. The first one is all, and these people can post bank entries. And there's a second one for enter, where they cannot post bank entries. And Sue has been assigned to enter, and Steve has been assigned to all. But in order to control the posting and that Steve doesn't post through the UI, only through the workflow console, we have a customization on the bank transfer screen, and we hide the post button using Sage's profiles. Logged in as Susan, we go ahead and create a bank entry. Sue is not able to post this bank entry, and we can see the workflow icon. The workflow instance has been started, and the next status is to either approve or reject. It's still a green arrow, so Sue knows it's in progress, but it's not for her to progress. Logged in as Steve, he can go to the workflow console, and he sees this bank entry number 3 waiting for him to approve or reject. But he can drill down to look at the bank entry. And on the bank entry screen, he sees the workflow icon as if he had opened the bank entry screen himself. And from here, he knows he can progress to approve or progress to reject this entry. And he's not able to post here. And if Steve approves here, the bank entry will be posted. And in the workflow inquiry, we see the bank entry and looking at the details. It was first created by Susan and it went into the wait state, and then Steve approved and took it from the wait state and approved and posted. As we've just seen in this quick start video, Extender Configurator allows you to configure workflow for master files, transactions, batches, and to configure icons on the screen to view the logs and progress the workflow. Please go to our website, orchid.systems, to view other videos on other features of Extender Configurator, like alerting, logging, and integration, and creating Orchid notes using Extender Configurator.